Our next guest is a Sky favourite. He served in war and is our most distinguished operational level battlefield commander since the Second World War. That's a fact. I'm referring, of course, to retired Major General Senator Jim Molan. Jim, cutting to the chase, the inauguration of Joe Biden has sparked a lively discussion in American strategic circles. I've seen some really interesting stuff in Journal Foreign Affairs looking at a new approach to Asia and so on. But a very disturbing piece this week by Roger Boys speculating pretty much on how the United States might support an insurgency after a Chinese invasion, regarding it as almost inevitable. We've talked about how alarming the situation is. Do you think it's deteriorated even in the month or two since we spoke?
I think it has, for the simple reason that China tried a full range of assertive activities in the air, verbal threats to Taiwan, prompting American manoeuvre of naval forces and replies from America. It also evoked a response from the government of Taiwan, and that followed, of course, an extraordinary range of transgressions by Chinese aircraft into Japanese airspace.
Absolutely.
Whether it's increasing or not is hard to say. I think that the Chinese will push this as far as they can. I think I may have said on the last show that we should never assume that logic will prevail in this.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, but it's not in China's economic interest to do something like... Well, China is working against its own economic interest right this second in relation to us.
Precisely.
And so that goes by the board, and there's a long history of tightly integrated nations going to war.
Yeah.
So we should not accept
Great Britain and Germany were one another's number one trading partners in 1914.
Absolutely correct.
The chilling revelation in Roger Boys' piece was that apart from the fact that their amphibious lodgement capability didn't stand up terribly well when stress tested, which was a good news, and you know that's the acme of military performance to actually do a non-permissive amphibious lodgement, but they did do a dry run rehearsal on a complete replica of the presidential palace in Taipei.
Yes.
That's pretty ominous, isn't it?
It is.
Like even Hugh White's got to finally say there's a problem with that.
And I think Hugh has come out and said that.
Yeah.
But he can blame a whole bunch of things that he's been against for a long period of time.
Yeah.
What this means, though, is that in the first instance, this is not a simple operation.
Yep.
The Chinese would have to take action, in my view, before they did it, against a number of things. The American forces in Japan, American forces in Guam, American forces at sea, and in particular the nuclear submarines in the vicinity of the Taiwan Straits. Now, their good friend Russia has long been producing nuclear torpedoes. And the Chinese aren't going to do that unless there is some vague chance of being successful, although the relationship between an authoritarian government and the advice generals give...
Yes.
It could be even worse than a democratic government and the advice that generals give.
That is...
So we can't rely on logic.
That's extremely worrying. Now, look, leave that situation where it is, because I want to come back now to a couple of specific responses we've made, because there's been some critiques made of some of the government's package last year, which I strongly endorsed as a leader writer at The Australian. I thought to come out with that large package on 1 July last year, enhancing our maritime strike... Robert Gottliebson wrote a piece saying that the JSF is a piece of junk. And as you know, it is very hard to defend this platform because so much of its capability is classified.
Correct.
But the arguments about it, people are looking at it through the prism of dogfighting, like a Spitfire versus a Messerschmitt, when you know it is part of a sensor-shooter link integrated through the battle space, where the aircraft that it kills will not even see it. That's a fair point, isn't it? So quickly, the US doesn't make rubbish aircraft. Israel doesn't buy rubbish aircraft. Is Gottliebson right or wrong? Because I'm getting a little bit irritated at his coverage.
Yeah, and he irritates me. The stuff that he's been writing on the submarine, where he's been quoting people like Andrew Hastie, he hasn't even spoken to Andrew over this. Didn't speak to the minister over any of this at all. As to whether this aircraft is a good aircraft, it is a good aircraft. It's like the submarine debate. The Navy, you've got to give the Navy some weight for being so dedicated towards the submarine. OK, an infantryman like myself and like you in your past life, we've got to give the Navy some weight for knowing what they're doing. Whether this one with the cost, etc., is another question altogether. In relation to the Joint Strike Fighter, The Air Force is continually telling us, and the pilots who operate it, that this is a fabulous aircraft.
Absolutely.
Now, it's yet to be perfect. And the Americans, they produce, I think, 600 now, and they'll have later blocks where they will increase the range by 25% and the computing power of the aircraft by a vast amount. Now, we've bought in early, but maybe we can retrofit. Who knows about that? But it has achieved initial operating capability now. The Prime Minister was up recently. Yep. So, yes, it is a good aircraft. The problem I've got, which Gottliebson never, ever questions, neither does anyone else, is where does it fit into an overall strategy?
Correct.
The Americans make an F-22, which is the most fabulous aircraft for shooting down other aircraft that you've ever got. Yeah. Below that in the American plan and strategy is the F-35.
It's not an air superiority. It's
not an air superiority. It can shoot down aeroplanes in certain circumstances. It's not an air superiority aircraft. For the Americans, this is beautiful. What war are we preparing for?
Yeah.
I ask this time and time again, and it's an unfair question when I ask it of uniformed members, because that's for us to decide in government. The fact that we bought a very good aircraft it frightens me to think that our logic is the logic that we've seen from 1945 to 2020, where we sent very small forces overseas with the Americans, high-quality forces, beautifully trained and equipped, very, very kind of Gucci forces, and they'd go overseas and they'd perform very well for Allied reasons. If we have to fight by ourselves with the Americans, because American power has diminished significantly, we have to fight by ourselves, we need a balanced force. I've got to say, of the three traditional services and the two new services, space and cyber information warfare, the Air Force is the closest to perfection.
Yes, agree with that.
It is extraordinary. However, it lacks lethality, it lacks mass, and it lacks sustainability.
Yep.
And that's a problem.
Now, we want to move quickly to Veterans Matters. We've got a crammed agenda tonight.
Yep.
Your maiden speech, you committed yourself to supporting veterans. And we've got a grab from your first speech in the Parliament in February 2018.
Good. To me, they represent everything that is good about Australia because they are Australia. Mr. President, I dedicate my efforts in this House to them. Thank you.
Now, you stand by those remarks, and I've served with you over a long period. And it must hurt to be smeared, along with a number of other distinguished veterans in this government, as enemies of the veterans community. And the way that people are rubbishing the appointment of the interim commissioner. I've read your defence of Dr Boss, and as recently as today, I spoke to a former Test cricketer, Tony Dell, who I've had on this program, South Vietnam veteran.
Yep.
He came away from a briefing with her and said she is absolutely fantastic. She gets it. Dane Christensen, another young veteran who's doing transition out of defence for members in the transition cell, came back, said the same thing. Yet she's being trashed on veteran sites, as are you and Andrew Hastie and others who've defended her. Give us the government's best argument for why this is the right approach and not this mantra that we're hearing all over the websites about a Royal Commission.
The government's best argument in relation to the National Commission is that it has all the powers of a Royal Commission, something which these websites and people like Heston Russell ignore entirely.
Completely forgetting it.
Ignore entirely. These are facts. It's not my opinion that it's better. These are facts. It has all the powers of a Royal Commission, but it is ongoing.
Correct.
I guess the third argument is that it's the only thing that's on the table at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, people like Heston and Pineapple Express, they conflate things. So they pull together, they quote me half, and I do object to that, but I do worry about Heston. And I was so worried about him, I called his father, who I served with many years ago. Because a lot of people who come out of the military and are respected as soldiers think that they will still be respected as soldiers and forgiven for anything, regardless of what they say. If you make gross overstatements, if you tell half-truths, and if you embroider the facts and go personal, then the level of respect that the Australian population has for you will diminish. Now, I find that out. I'm a politician. You expect that of me. It's appalling, isn't it? But I don't do it.
Yeah.
And in relation to the National Commission versus Royal Commission, the National Commission is better for veterans for the simple reason that it has all the powers of a Royal Commission, and it will go on and on and on. Now, when they conflate it and come back to saying that the interim commissioner is no good, that is grossly unfair against the legislation that's on the table. I've heard everything that you've heard, and I think she's doing a good job.
Terrific. That is, Jim, that's very reassuring, I'm sure, and I hope a lot of the veteran community listened to us tonight. Thank you yet again for your time.